Hi, and welcome back to the Wandering Out Loud podcast. I am Allison, your host. Today, I want to go through an experience that I've done recently. I was having not a bad week, but kind of a bad day. We all have them. You get a bad day, you get into a funky mood. Sometimes it's really a struggle to pull yourself out of it and figure out maybe it's what's really bothering you, and that's kind of a day I had recently. So I wanted to go through and figure it and kind of talk about briefly about what I did to kind of figure out what was going on, because I just knew I felt unsettled. I knew that I just didn't understand. Like I was like, what is this mood? It was a kind of thing. So I want to talk a little bit about what I did. So, and of course, when I feel that way of, okay, well, I'm in this mood, I'm not in a great mood, it's just a mood. And whether it's feeling down, whether it's just feeling blah, like just overwhelmed, and I just, don't feel anything. And so, what do you do? Like, how do you identify? So this mood, I was kind of feeling that. It was, so what I did was I started Googling. I used a little bit of ChatGPT. Actually, I was using ChatGPT. Now, I'm not the world's biggest fan of artificial intelligence and AI, but it's useful in a pinch. And it's useful for, I think, certain things at this point. And something that someone had sent to me recently was, oh yeah, I was having a really bad day. I was at work and I was in the middle of all the feelings. I was frustrated, I was angry, I was upset, all these negative emotions. And so they said, obviously, they couldn't turn to their therapist in the middle of a work day without a scheduled appointment. And so this person goes, I use ChatGPT as my therapist. I was like, well, okay. How did you do that? So we were going through what that was. And so we didn't get into specifics. They didn't quite tell me exactly what kind of questions based on what they were experiencing. So I figured, since I'm in this mood, give it a try. I don't have anyone to talk to at this moment. I can't pick up the phone and call. It wasn't in that, like, I couldn't do that in that moment that I was feeling this and trying to figure out how do I undo this and move on. And so I turned to ChatGPT, and the first thing I wrote in there was I feel stuck. How can I move forward? I knew I felt stuck. I just didn't know why. And so I finally got it to say, hey, can you give me questions on when a person feels stuck, what kind of questions should they be asking themselves to feel unstuck? And of course, I came up with, 20 questions maybe, in different categories. I didn't go through all the categories. I also keep in mind, this is why I kind of have a love-hate relationship with artificial intelligence, and it's a matter of take what resonates, take what works, leave the rest. Not everything. Please remember that artificial intelligence, AI, ChatGPT, all those are meant for the public. They are not tailored to you specifically. Okay? So just keep that in mind. And I knew that going in. So when I got these questions, I was like, okay, which ones resonate? Which ones really speak to me that I feel I need to answer in this moment? And so I wrote a couple down. So the first one is why, what do I feel like I'm stuck on? That was one of my first questions that really popped out to me is what do I feel stuck on? I know I feel stuck, but what do I feel stuck on? And so I kind of thought about it for a minute, and I wrote down some answers. And I was like, okay, this is what I feel stuck on. And the next one that really popped out at me was I feel stuck. So what am I resisting right now? When you feel stuck, a lot of times you're resisting something. You're, pushing it up against something, And so for me, it was, I'm resisting going with the flow. I resist being still. I'm someone who has been taught, whether I guess it's childhood trauma, whether it's, implications from society, that norms that I have kind of, want to be, like I said, I'm a former people pleaser. So I knew that I've always had this idea or felt like we had to be busy. That's, so me being still doesn't make me feel productive. It doesn't make me feel like I'm contributing. And that's usually when we find answers. And so I have a hard time with that. Something I struggle with on the daily is sitting still. I'm also a mom, I'm a wife, I work, I do all the fun things. And so sometimes being presented with even the opportunity to sit still and really kind of just be in that moment, it's not there. So I took 2 minutes. I gave myself a 2-minute timer on my phone. And I said, okay, we're just going to sit here for 2 minutes. Close my eyes. And all I said was breathe in, breathe out. So meditation, essentially. Breathe in, breathe out for 2 minutes to just kind of really calm my nervous system. I was like, okay, I feel a little more grounded. I'm still resisting something, but I knew that it was going with the flow. And I'm like, but what am I going against? So if I'm not going with the flow, what am I resisting? What am I going against? That led me to the next question that really popped out. And that was how I am feeling right now, emotionally, mentally, physically. And so I went through, okay, emotions. I'm frustrated. Why am I specific? And I didn't ask specifically, why am I frustrated? It's just, I'm frustrated. I just named the emotions. I'm depressed. I'm, frustrated. I wasn't angry. So that wasn't it. Name those emotions that go through. If you have to, Google some negative emotions. There's lots of charts out there that can help you identify and name what you might be feeling. Mentally, I felt like I was throwing up roadblocks. Not specific roadblocks, just mentally just throwing them up for some reason. And then physically, this is the one that really stood out to me, and that was as well, if I'm resisting that, I feel like I'm pushing against a wall. Like I'm trying to push through something, and I'm really giving it my all, as if I'm literally trying to, what is it? Those people who, work out and they're trying to, okay, football players, that's what I'm thinking of. Football players, and they're trying to move the person backwards as they block. Sorry, we're in football season. We're about to be in football season. I saw the kids practicing this morning. So really doing that physical, like, even though I wasn't physically doing it in the moment, I could feel my physical, like my body actually doing this push against this, what felt like a wall to me, because I couldn't move it. And I was literally mentally tiring myself out because I felt like I was physically doing this. So of course that's that resisting part. So then I kind of came up with some subset questions to that question. And that was, okay, well, what exactly am I resisting? I know I'm not going with the flow. I know I'm not sitting still. I know that, a lot of different things that kind of came out with that I was answering. And for me, I kind of sat with that for a minute. Like, what specifically in this moment is making me feel like I'm resisting? And how can I change it? That was the other big piece, was how can I change it? Okay, so I spent like a minute, maybe 2, writing down all the things that I felt like I was resisting. Sitting still, not feeling like I was productive enough, not feel like I wasn't, like I said, I got all these, juggling all these things in the air, and I feel like one is falling while another one, I'm focused on being the mom, but at the same time, my kids have been home with me all summer. And so work is, I'm not saying that work is slacked, but it's feeling like I've neglected my kids because they're at home, they're bored, I'm working from home. And so it's this whole juggling act, and I feel like I was failing at something at almost every moment. Something was being dropped, something was happening. So I kind of wrote down exactly what that was. And then the kicker for me was, how do I change this? How do I get out of this mental state of feeling like I'm resisting, I'm not going with the flow, and I can't do this. And I'm tiring myself out even more than anything. And here was the key for me, and that was, how do I change this to a positive? How do I change this to a positive from a negative? I know that I feel like I'm pushing against a wall. I know that I feel like I'm tearing myself out, like I'm trying to budge this thing, and I'm not going with the flow of things. So in other words, when I have a slow down moment at work, to really lean into that and say, I know it's okay for this moment. I know that there'll be more work coming. Or, you know, the same thing with the kids. I'm really busy this week with the kids, and then next week, I know next week we're going to be, you know, our schedule changes and they're not going to be at camps, and we're all just going to kind of have that moment of rest and really lean into that. Like I said, I am someone who was brought up, whether it be society or childhood. I mean, my entire childhood was busy. I was someone who, yes, went to school, obviously, but all the way through, you know, my senior year of high school, probably starting, we're going to go with third, fourth grade, I was doing competitive gymnastics, and then I was doing competitive dance. And I dance or did gymnastics 20, 30 hours a week. That probably, and some of that might include, I think one time I added it up, and it was a full-time job, because I was competing on the weekends, and then I was at the dance studio or at the gymnastics place at least, 2 hours a night at the gym or at the studio practicing. And so I was always busy. I was constantly busy, constantly juggling. No idea how my mother did it. She had 4 kids. But I've always been taught to be constantly busy. And so leaning into that moment of stillness was really tough for me. So I set a timer for a couple of minutes on my phone, however long you feel comfortable. For me, I was like, okay, 2 minutes sounds great. 2 minutes is actually faster than you think sometimes. Sometimes it's slower than you think. And I flipped the script. I imagined myself being able to, the wall wasn't there. I took the wall down, and that I was able to take steps forward, and that I was able to go with the flow. I like pictures. I think more in pictures than I do in than words. And so the other thing I imagined while I was meditating on this, going with the flow, was okay, I'm, like I said, took the wall down, I'm moving forward, I'm walking along this path, a hiking trail, essentially. I like the mountains, so I was hiking on the mountains. Maybe you're the beach person and you're walking on the beach and listening to the ocean. The other thing was like being in a lazy river, just floating, not trying to go forward even faster, not trying to resist and stay backwards, but it was just, I'm in the inner tube and I'm just flowing, and I'm just floating, and I'm just laying there, and the sun's beating down on me. And after a couple of minutes, I realized my nervous system especially started to finally mellow out, and that I was no longer blocked, and I did not feel stuck in that moment anymore. And I was like, I can sit here and I'm okay. And I can sit here for a minute, and it's okay to take a break. Because that was really something tough for me. To take a break is sometimes really tough. I'm always doing something, and I've my to-do list, I'm sure. If you have a to-do list and you like to cross it off, then write it on there. Meditate, or just sit still for a couple of minutes. And I know that's hard if you're a parent, because especially if you've got young kids, they don't leave you alone ever, it feels like. So I hope this helps, and I will see you next time. Have a good week.